Okay, so what we are doing this week, as I mentioned, we're focusing on the concept of smart. So there's a couple of articles that define what smart is, because smart doesn't mean, it's not the conventional definition of smart. If you go to the dictionary, it's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a specific use of technology, a specific type of technology. Um, Internet connectivity is a huge part of it. Machine learning, AI. These are huge concepts within the smart literature and within the smart city movement. So smart doesn't just mean a good idea or using one's brain to make good decisions. That's not what it means. Okay, so it's about technology. So these articles explain what that is. They explain when these ideas, when the technology first really started to be used. And even getting back to the idea that social scientists who started to use data to try to explain cities, people living in them, in some ways that was a precursor to this because it's about data, it's data driven. So it's trying to understand that. And so there's two articles and a web resource. I mean, they're all articles essentially, but the first one, the Alahar, this is a journal article. It's in an academic journal. The second one is in a sort of a more of a magazine, a popular journal. And the third one is a web page. There's also unit notes you can read. So they're written by me just as a summary instead of doing a video lecture. It's just a summary of the content that we were covering during the unit. And then there's an assignment. So this is the first sort of major assignment. Yes, you did a discussion, but this is the first major assignment. It's worth 17%. It's a bit of a funny number that comes from having to apply numbers to all kinds of other things, like all the learning activities also have to have a percent. So it all has to add up to 100. So we ended up at 17 for this, but it's around 20%. Think of it as around 20%. So it's worth enough, right? And it's a very interesting assignment because what you're asked to do, the rationale for this assignment, is to look at the city where you live. Right. So to think of the city where you live right now, or perhaps the city that you're familiar with, that you lived in the past, doesn't really matter. But the idea is that you are applying what we're studying in this course to a very real world example that's happening right now. Right. But there's different ways that cities have applied the concept of smart and sustainable, and that's part of the purpose of doing this assignment. There's quite detailed instructions, so I just want everybody to be very careful about following the assignment instructions, and I'll show you the rubric as well. But the starting point should be just trying to find the homepage of your municipality. So it has to be the official municipal homepage, right? It can't just be something that somebody has written about Toronto or Mississauga or Pickering or whatever. It has to actually be, www.toronto.ca, whatever the home page is. So that's your first step, is to find that. And then the second step is to use whatever search function is associated with that web page. So usually right in the middle, there's a little search window, or up to the top right, there's a search window. And what you do there is you just put in some key terms. Like you might even just put in smart city and see what happens, right? If you search for smart city, what happens? You might search for smart and sustainable. You might search for just sustainable, because it's possible that if you search for smart, there's no hits. So then you might want to look for sustainable, or you might want to change your city actually, because most cities actually are using that language. So you're trying to find a specific project that the city is doing. So if you put in search terms such as smart city and you click it and there's a whole bunch of hits, look for one that looks to be a very specific project, right? Has a name, has a start date, it's hopefully ongoing. I mean, if it finished in 2023 or something like that, or 2022, that's recent enough. But it should be quite recent or ongoing. And it should be specific. It just shouldn't be a general, the city of Mississauga is committed to smart city principles. That's not a specific project, right? It should be a very specific project. And then what you do is, once you find that project, it will have its own webpage, right? Probably. Provide the URL of that webpage and also a screen capture of the copyright date. And I have an example that'll show where I did that, but how you might do that. So these are some of the nuts and bolts things that you need to include. And they're also in the marking rubric, so make sure you include them all. And I will also put a copy of this presentation up in the course bulletins, in the course important announcements form. I'll put a PDF version of it up so you have all this information and the recording. So after you've done that, then comes the actual report that you have to write. So your report, it should describe the project in some detail. It should explain when it started, why, what the rationale for it, what department, if that information is given. Like, just provide as much information as you can. And even the what. Sometimes the what isn't clear. Like, what exactly is this project? What is the purpose of it? So make sure that's all very clear. So describe it and then analyze it. So the analysis is a little bit more where you have to put on your, academic hats and try to critical evaluate what the rationale is, whether or not you think it's sort of actually like a legitimate use of the concepts of smart and sustainable, because sometimes those are used more for marketing purposes than for actually. But if there's a specific problem that is trying to be solved, right, you can write about that and you can evaluate. It. It's not long, your description analysis. It's about 2 pages total, 500 words, not including references. So hopefully you have some fun doing it. It's a way to try to get a sense of how these concepts that we're examining in the class actually apply to the real world, and for how municipalities today are using them. So hopefully you have some fun doing it. The last paragraph there is please cite all your sources using APA style, and please write in paragraph form. So don't write a whole bunch of bullet points. There's a tendency when doing a project like this is to list things. Well, the city of this is doing these 10 things. Please try to avoid writing in list form. Instead, write in well-organized paragraphs that flow, one to the other. Paragraphs usually have a topic sentence that explains the topic of the paragraph. They should transition one into the other. You can use headings if you want, if they're meaningful and if they help, but don't use too many headings. It's only a 2-page paper, so I wouldn't expect more than a few headings. Like, there shouldn't be a heading for every paragraph. Okay, and you don't have to use headings. They're not required. Okay, just getting to the sources. So you will be looking at the municipal website, a report on the municipal website. So that's certainly one source. Whether or not you bring in other sources, it depends on you, I guess. You may find that maybe there's been some research on it that you can look at, or maybe there's been news articles written about it. It all depends. It may be that nothing has been written on it. So then you would essentially have, the municipal website, that's your source. You may use some course materials, right? If you want to